So for this week on CyberSchool, we're going to be going over our Cisco Secure Phone Cases. We make a line of hard cases that go around a few different Cisco phones. Mostly the DX70 and DX80 are the kind of the big movers in terms of these cases, but we also have them available for the Cisco 88 series, the 88, 51, and 61 secure phones. And these cases are really, really useful in areas when you're going to be deploying these phones. We find them most used in the criminal corrections industry, where they're typically used as phones that inmates can use to communicate with, say, their lawyers or family or anybody that could come visit the particular inmates. And these have a pretty wide range of use cases, not just necessarily in that particular industry, although that is where we sell the most of them. They're really, really useful cases, kind of like an OtterBox on steroids almost. You know, you're getting a really, really powerful, good case for that really expensive Cisco phone. So what are these secure phone cases? They're basically just enclosures or cases that go around your Cisco phone with the same idea of, your cell phone case, just a whole lot stronger. You're going and you're spending this, a pretty sizable chunk of change into one of these Cisco phones, especially for some of these bigger penitentiaries that might have, 10 or 15 of these phones. And that's a pretty good amount of money right there. And you really want to protect this investment because especially for some of these penitentiaries, you're dealing with inmates that are maybe a little bit disgruntled, maybe a little bit frustrated with their public defendant. They didn't get through the trial like they wanted to, and they're a little upset, and they might try to damage their phones. And, I would much rather have, an inmate damage one of these cases than, damage that, several $1,000 Cisco phone that you might have to replace, that might not be repairable, whereas our case is likely repairable. They allow for, to use these phones in kind of dangerous areas where you don't really need to worry about, that very expensive phone getting damaged because of the secure case that we put these in. We really see these, again, mainly in the penitentiary market, things like jails, prisons, or maybe holding areas before an inmate would actually go to, say, an actual prison. Maybe they're in a holding cell or, the drunk tank at a local police station before they actually go off to the county prison. So they're really useful, and they come into a lot of different places. But what actually makes this case secure? So it's actually a steel enclosure that the phones are fitted in. It's actually a pretty thick steel, and we use the standard Torx security bits that we'll use with our other outdoor intercoms to ensure that you're not just dealing with, say, a regular Phillips head or a flathead screwdriver to be able to actually remove the screws. They're going to use a special Torx security bit, so they're a little bit more difficult for somebody without some basic tools to remove. So that way the prisoners or the people that might be interacting with these phone cases won't have an easy way to actually get the faceplate off there and potentially damage the unit. So the Lexan cover that we use over the actual screen is really useful. We used to use acrylic for some of the very first initial models that we were using, and there were some problems with the acrylic because while the acrylic is stronger than glass, it's about 3 to 4 times as stronger than glass. When it breaks, it kind of shards and turns into basically kind of long pieces of very sharp plastic. And Lexan doesn't really have that material characteristic and isn't subject to what's known as sharding, when it will create, basically one of those shivs that you would see, say in like a prison movie or something. The guys will get that and then stab somebody in the chow line. You won't really have that problem with a Lexan material just because of the way that the polycarbonate is actually made. It's an extremely durable, strong material. It's, depending on the thickness of it, it can almost be 200 times as strong as glass. So it's ridiculously strong in comparison to other clear materials that you'll use for this type of stuff. Lexan is commonly used in things like, motorcycle windscreens, the visors for, say, like a football team or even hockey, so they can really deal with those high impact, high velocity sports. And then heck, they're even used for canopies and fighter jets. So that this kind of material that we're using over the screen of the Cisco phone is super strong. It's fairly scratch resistant and really, really good to put into an environment like this. You could have one of those big old inmates, pounding on the screen with a handset, and he might scuff it a little bit, but he's not going to break that Lexan that's in there. So it's a really, really strong, powerful plastic that we put in there that is really kind of absorbent to any impacts that it'll take. Instead of, kind of creating micro fractures and then shattering, it's just going to kind of absorb it. It's really, really cool, fun to play with stuff. And it also comes with a 32-inch armored cable for the handset to prevent the handset removal, and it's actually really secured in there. So some of those big guys in the jail that have been working out for 20 years, that are super big buff guys, they could go and try to rip that cable off and really have a hard time doing it, just because it's so secure in there. It's a nice armored cable, kind of what you would expect for this type of a situation. So why would you actually want to use a case like this? Well, first and foremost, any Cisco product, but especially their phones, are extremely expensive. With the DX70 and the DX80 actually being some of the most expensive phones on the market, they've been superseded by another unit that we're designing a case for that is even more expensive than the DX70s and the DX80s. So if you're going to be going and deploying one of these ridiculously expensive phones, I mean, it's a great phone for, the price that you're paying. You're getting your money's worth out of it, but you're spending thousands of dollars on one of these units to basically put for inmates and people that very well might damage the unit, for them to be the main people that actually interface with this stuff. So keeping one of those phones and protecting that investment is super, super important. And the video communication is something that we're seeing, especially with COVID and everything going on right now, but even years prior in 2018 and 2019, we saw these particular cases be a really big mover, because two-way video communication is just so important for prisoners and their lawyers, and when they're speaking with anybody, to be able to see the person and be able to communicate with them. It's so important to have a conversation like that. And even though these people might be felons, they could be, murderers or what have you, they should still be able to see and speak with the people that are potentially representing them in court, or their friends or their family that might want to come visit them. They're still humans. We want to treat them as such. And that video communication is so important. So if you're going to put in one of these fancy Cisco phones, you really want to go and protect that investment and protect that phone. And the Lexan window that we have in there prevents all that damage to the phone, so that way they can still be able to see everybody in there, but that capability of being able to see who they're speaking with doesn't add the capability for one of those guys to go and shatter the screen and get a shard to make a shiv out of it. So it makes it a really, really good compromise, being able to go and protect that investment, but protect it with that level of quality, so that way things can't get damaged, but to potentially, harm other people that could be inside the jail, whether it's other prisoners or, potentially guards or corrections officers that could be there. So a secure phone case is absolutely recommended for these types of scenarios and these applications. So the units that we have are both the lines for the DX70 and the DX80. The DX70 case is 011388, and that phone has actually been discontinued, and we've got a few cases left. So that one's kind of on a buy them before they run out. Same thing with the DX80. They're kind of being slowly end of life by Cisco, so those cases are going to go away. So they're on a better price right now. But the DX80 part number is 011416, and then the newer line for the 88 series, the 8865 and the 8851 and the 8861, they're a little bit smaller. You're not getting that gigantic screen like you get with the DX70 or the DX80, but these come at a much, much lower price point, and they're a lot more user-friendly, because they can support things like keypads and a lot of other cool features with the 88 series that you wouldn't necessarily get with the DX series. So we've got options for all of those. The case for the 8865 is 011485. And the case for both the 8851 and the 8861 is part number 011474. So now that we've kind of talked about what these cases are and how you would use these cases, why you would want them, let's talk a little bit more about installation, because it's all well and good to know the good parts of this case, but if it's really hard to install, it's not really that worth it. And thankfully, these things are super duper easy to install because of the way that we designed the case. We designed everything in-house, so we really designed it with security and then ease of implementation in mind. So you'll find with all of these different ones, one, they've got conduit holes basically on all 5 sides of the gang box, the back gang box that's actually mounted to the wall. You've got one that would be in the back of the gang box itself, and then a punch out on each of the basically the other sides of the box to complete all 5 sides. So that way you can go and route the cables through the conduit, depending on if you want to go for top access, bottom access, or from the left or right side. We find that most people actually use the rear conduit hole just so that way there's really nothing for the prisoners to potentially grab onto. But there are options for all those different routes. So of course, when you're going to want to go and install one of these things, you're going to want to have some kind of a conduit to actually route all the cables in there, and definitely a secure conduit at that. But after that point, after you kind of establish how you're going to route the cables through, you need to go and punch out the knockouts. And there's knockouts on the top half for the keyholes to actually go and get the unit in place. The keyhole capability is basically, the same thing that you'll see on a lot of different paintings and stuff like that, where it's basically kind of an elongated screw hole where you can fit the screw through the bottom part, and then as you slide the screw through, you can slide the case down a little bit into the top notch of the keyhole, and that way the screw will be retained in there and actually hold the case to the wall. So that makes it really easy to go and basically just hold your case up against the wall and mark all your spots and get your screw in there to hold it, and you can mount it there, and then you use the bottom knockouts of the 3 bottom knockouts along the bottom half of the case, and that way you can actually go and do in proper lag screws, say if you're going to be putting it into a cinder block wall with a big washer on the other side, to really secure it in there. So you get the combination of the keyhole knockouts to really make it easy to just get the case on the wall, and then you got the bottom screw holes to actually go and really get it securely on there. So with that combination of the two, it makes it really easy to go and actually mount the back of the gang box to the wall. It's really versatile. You've got so many different options to route your cables through, and it's really kind of if you can hang a painting, you can hang one of these secure cases to a wall. Super easy to work with. But that's not the whole part. Of course, just getting the back box on there is just kind of the brief start of it. So then we have to get to actually mounting the phone. And the mounting the phone can be a little bit more complicated. So of course, after you've got your phone mounted on the wall, you want to get all your cables pulled through and then have the USB connection ready to go and plug that into the particular phone that you're going to be working with. So the way that the phone actually works in the cradle here is the foot stand of the phone, because if you've never worked with either of these DX70s or these DX80s, they're like a giant tablet, essentially. They're really, really big, basically just full screens, heck, the size of like a regular computer monitor, but it's all touch screen and it's a phone. Super cool. But they've got these basically big foot stands that you can see on the left-hand side of our image here that actually stand up and kind of tilt back the screen as it's sitting there. And we take advantage of that foot stand, and it actually fits behind the plate that's affixed on the bottom half of the gang box. So that way the whole foot stand is right nice back behind that plate. So it really keeps that rigid there. And then the stress relief bar is basically the bar that the foot stand kind of makes the triangle against the back of the case and keeps it nice and flush there. Thankfully, when Cisco designed these, they've got these really nice, almost giant dowels that are right there. And that makes it really easy for it to push into the clamps on the back of the case there. So that way you basically just go and orient the foot stand so it fits right behind that plate, and you push the unit in, and it'll give you a nice little kind of snap as you get it in there when the strain relief bar actually plugs into the clamps there. And it's really nice and held properly. And then we've got this really nice little piece of, it's like styrofoam, but like a nicer styrofoam. It's like almost kind of like a plastic, and it sits around the camera as like a little cradle to go and secure all that in there. So that's kind of how you'll go and mount the phone. And as you can see on the right-hand side here, with these units, because these DX70s and these DX80s are such beefy, powerful units, they're not just as simple to say power over PoE. You usually need an AC power adapter to actually plug one of these things in. And we've got a nice little cradle that fits on the inside, so you just kind of slide your power adapter in there, and then you can just plug your regular AC power cable in there and be off and running with it. So it's a really easy way to go and mount your phone securely in there, and all the nice little parts have nice little cradles, whether it's, a nice little metal cradle for the whole thing to actually sit back into, or the camera itself has a nice little almost styrofoam-esque cradle for the camera to sit in. So that way everything's nice and sitting in there properly. You really won't have to worry about it in there, especially, if, say, they're used out here on the West Coast where there might be earthquakes and stuff. The thing really won't be rattling around too much in there. It's really secure once you actually get the thing in place. And of course, as soon as you go and you get it all mounted in there, you do just want to plug in the USB controller board from the case itself into the phone. So that way, because the way that the phone identifies the case is where it basically identifies the case as a really fancy headset. Essentially, you just plug it in, and it's like you've got, like a secondary case or like a headset for it. It's really trick the way that it works. Then, of course, when you go and you get the phone all nice and mounted in there, as you can kind of see on the right-hand side of the image here, it fits nice and clean in there, and the bottom of the lip just fits right nice there on the bottom. It just kind of sits perfectly there in place. And then when you go and actually affix the front faceplate, you really do want to go through and do some final prep and really just clean any smudges and stuff off the phone when you were doing the installation. So get some nice, glass cleaning, solution, whether it's, Windex or, what have you, whatever you're using for it. You do want to clean the screen of the phone as well as both sides of that Lexan window, as well as the little camera porthole. So that way there aren't any smudges or anything in there, so the users of the phone get a nice, good quality experience. And when you get all that done, you basically just install the faceplate using all the security screws. There are a ton of screws to go and put in. So what I did when I was putting a couple of these together, I would do basically the four corners of the front panel just to hold it in place, and then just work your way around. I always do the idea that you kind of the same way that you do when you're mounting a tire, where you kind of do opposite corner to just go and do kind of a nice little star pattern as you go through and do it. So that way it all kind of sinks it down properly in there. I do that for everything. It's not really necessary, but it's just a good practice. And that way, after you go and install it, the phone is going to be super duper secure in there. You won't have to worry about anything. But of course, just putting all the case together, that's not the final job. You want to make sure that the thing actually works. So, of course, after you get it all installed and you get the front faceplate mounted and everything, the phone should turn on, and you should see that it's actually registered on Cisco Call Manager. If it's not, you'll want to work with whoever manages that particular Cisco Call Manager system to make sure that the thing can actually register. If they need to do any additional configuration, take care of that process. And then after you get it all registered and working properly, you want to ensure that the unit actually works. So you want to lift the handset off, and that should actually take the phone off hook, like you just press the call button actually on the interface of the phone. It should simulate just like that. You should lift up the handset, and effectively it should take the unit off hook. You should get a dial tone, and it should, properly expect, like you would expect after you take a phone off hold, the phone should reciprocate that. And then after you replace the handset, it should go back on hook and return back to the normal standard screen. And depending on the model of unit that you have on the Cisco phone, it should actually illuminate around the screen, so that way you know that it's getting prepared for a call. After you go and complete all that, you really kind of have to come down to the decision, are these cases right for my particular setup and installation? Well, if you're going to be using any of the models of Cisco phones that we covered today, you might want to consider getting one of these cases, just because of the sheer price and the investment of funds that you're putting into these particular phones. They're super duper expensive, and you really want to protect that investment and make that last for a long time. The nice thing about Cisco hardware, you're paying a lot for it, but the stuff lasts like nothing else out there. It's really good quality, products that you're getting from Cisco. They're expensive and you're paying for that quality, but you're getting really good stuff out of it. And if you get one of our cases, you can really extend the lifespan of that particular phone. So you also, when you're going and going to be implementing these phones, you really need to consider the environment and who's going to be using it. If they're going to be going into kind of a dangerous area or dangerous situation where this phone might be used, i.e. the penitentiary industry, it's really good to have a good case for this. So that way, the phone is secure, so that way the phone doesn't get damaged. But the things with the big phones like this is they usually have some kind of a glass screen, and glass is real sharp and great for shivs if they want to go and get somebody in the chow lines. You really want to try to prevent that. The cases aren't just for protecting that investment, but it's also protecting the people that would be using that particular hardware, or the people that might be around somebody that's using that particular hardware. And the really solid construction of these units really prevents any kind of tampering or damage that might happen with it. They're fairly scratch resistant on that front touchscreen, and the Lexan, again, is just a super cool material. It's really strong and is very, very shard resistant. So you really don't have any big worries about putting something like that in there. And the nice thing also, it comes with, it's kind of expected for something like this, but it comes with a really nice solid armored core construction, so you really don't have to worry about any part of it. From the ground up, we designed this thing for security in mind. But one kind of trade-off for opting for a case like this, because of the hardware that we used, and you lose the touchscreen capability due to the case, where because of the material that we used and the proximity to the touchscreen, you lose the touch capability by opting for one of these cases. So it's a little bit of a trade-off there. But in most times when the prisoners are going to be using these units, they don't have that capability to say, oh, I'm going to dial a number and call outbound. They typically, they're almost like a point-to-point scenario where the one phone on the other side calls a different phone. They basically call particular stations. So they wouldn't necessarily need that touchscreen capability, but that is lost when you're using the case. So one thing that I've been doing recently with all of our cyber schools is just going over any kind of special terms that we used. And there's only two today. One that we've really hit on quite a bit, but one that I wanted to cover in a little bit more detail is sharding. And that's basically just a way that, say, glass or any type of material can break in a way that creates shards. You'll see it where, say, for example, like you shatter a regular window at your home, and that'll create bigger shards. Whereas, for example, if you shatter a window in your car, that's safety glass, and that'll just create, basically, really big sand crystals. It's really just big pieces of glass that aren't particularly sharp. And Lexan and other polycarbonate materials like that don't create these types of shards, so they're really good in environments where you want to prevent any type of sharding or things that could occur and create those kind of sharp objects that you might need to deal with. Lexan is just the thermoplastic polymer material that we use for the front cover. It kind of goes hand in hand there with sharding. And it's a really cool, very strong material. It's actually, Lexan is kind of a brand. It's owned by GE, and it's one of the many different options that you can get for this type of thermopolymer plastic. So really, really rugged, very strong material, and very useful in this type of situation.
Thank you for watching this edition of CyberSchool. If you have any questions, please get in contact with our sales department. They are available by email at sales@cyberdata.net or by phone at 831-373-2601 extension 334. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe for more content like this from CyberData.